I got my abusive ex sent to prison in false charges. Warning. Some audiences may find this content disturbing. View at your own discretion. Welcome to the House of Reddit. Today, we share 11 different nuclear revenge stories posted on Reddit. I got my abusive ex sent to prison in false charges. This is definitely going to be one of the cruelest things you have ever read. Warning, mentions of miscarriage, abuse. This happened around 40 years ago. I used to live in a conservative country. The whole women don't work. Men can't be abused. Abortion is a punishable crime. Sort of country. I was dating a girl at that time. She was a typical narcissist. 1 year into the relationship and she was abusing me in every way, verbal, physical, sexual. At that time, I didn't even realize what I was going through was abuse. She forced me to sleep with her and forcibly got herself pregnant, when I told her I wanted space. She told me how I must always be her or the child will pay the price. She used to threaten me saying that the child will die if I leave her. Few weeks into the pregnancy and I wanted out. I was very confused at that time. I felt angry, frustrated, disgusted with myself but I didn't know why. I knew what was happening was wrong, but I couldn't articulate my feelings to others. All I knew was that I need to get out or I wasn't going to survive. So, I got a transfer to another city secretly. I was planning to leave and never look back. But the thought of an innocent child under her mercy was unbearable. Then, I put another plan into motion. I got abortion pills from a dealer with cash. I had to travel to another city for a week for work. I grounded the pills and replaced the powder inside her medicine capsules with the abortion pills powder. She takes those medicines daily. I told her I am breaking up with her just before leaving. And I also told her I will leave the city by the end of the month. She called all our mutual acquaintances and told them about how heartless I was being. The child got aborted while I was away on business trip. She was detained by the time I came back because the doctor suspected that it was an abortion and not a miscarriage. When the police questioned me, I told them that I told her I was breaking up with her and that I was all set to move to another city by the end of the month. This was confirmed by others. The police thought she performed an illegal abortion to avoid being a single mother. She didn't have a job and generally it is frowned upon having kids out of wedlock. She got sentenced to 25 years in prison for homicide. She died in prison after serving 23 years. She was a horrible person to me. But there is no sure of me justifying my actions by saying she would have been horrible to the child too. Maybe she would have changed. Maybe she would have come to her senses once I left. Maybe her mother instincts would have kicked in and she would have been an amazing mother. It just wasn't a chance that I was willing to take. I made a choice into getting into a relationship with her. I just couldn't even entertain the thought of leaving an innocent baby with a person like her. I am an asshole, a murderer and a fraud. But I don't regret what I was forced to do. I don't feel comfortable sharing my abuse. But I can honestly say that being raped wasn't the worst of it. There were other much horrible physical abuse, some of which I can't talk about till this day. Kill 3 kittens and a cat, prepare to have your life ruined. My wife and I live in a small town near the outskirts. It's all houses and no flats there. This will be very important later on. We also had a retired neighbor. Well, just call her Karen. Now Karen, we found out, had a bit of a history. More exactly, her husband beat a worker to death when he caught him stealing, and then covered it up by hanging him in the forest. He managed to get away with it due to some political and police connections. The husband had died in the meantime, but everybody still remembered it, small city mentality, and she was an absolute outcast. That was probably exacerbated by her being an absolute Karen. Now that that is over, let's get into the meat of it. So over a year ago we adopted a cat to go alongside our tomcat. Surprisingly for us, they had kittens quite quickly, 3 of them, some 2 months after we adopted her. So we were raising them up, thinking about who should we give them to, when suddenly both she and the kittens disappeared. We found just one of the kittens in terrible agony that night. Her, I don't know what to call them, screams had woken us up. She died before we got to the vet. We already had our suspicions, which were confirmed by the vet. Broken glass. Given that the kittens always followed their mother, what we suspected happened was that Karen put a bowl of meat in glass, and the cat found it and shared it with the kittens. My wife wanted to go to the police. I had better ideas in mind. I should mention that the fence between us is an old one made of chicken wire with a lot of holes. Very easy to cross. So the next Sunday when Karen went to church, she was very religious. I went to check through her house. Guess what I found in the trash? The 2 other kittens and the cat. And so I set my plan into motion. Next week, on Sunday, I went into her house again. This time I had come prepared. I had cleaned everything flammable between our house and hers. Once inside her house I staged a little accident. She had a very flammable carpet. One well-placed turned candle and it started. So Karen comes home and sees that it's all burning. Most people would stop at that. We didn't. By now my wife was fully on board. Seeing Karen there homeless, afraid and all around desperate, we offered her to stay at our place for a while. Good neighbors as we were, everyone else would have told her to fuck off, she knew, on the condition she tells us the truth about the cats. We promised we weren't interested in pressing charges, we just wanted closure. Obviously I also had a hidden recorder on me. And when we let her inside she tearfully confessed everything, saying how much she was sorry, how she wished she could make it right. So now I had a recording that was enough for quite a lot of criminal and civilian charges, cruelty to animals, destruction of property, and emotional trauma. But I wanted to go for one more. The next week, after she brought all her stuff in, we served her an absolutely delicious lunch, duck with mushed potatoes. The only thing was, her portion had a crap ton of laxatives. So after she started shitting her guts out, we called for an ambulance, insisting she should go to the hospital. So Karen goes to the hospital and finds out there was nothing wrong. Pretty pissed she comes back to our home, to find all her stuff on the street and me and my wife on the fence, telling her to fuck off. The main gate to our courtyard however was left partially open on purpose. We also told her we would be pressing charges on the cats. Now entitled, angry and scared bitch that she was, what do you think, did she take the bait? Of course she did, and she lounged right through the gate to discover both me and my wife had 2 wooden sticks on us, that we promptly used to knock her teeth out. We then pressed charges on everything: damage to property, the cat and kittens were technically our property, emotional trauma, killing the cats and us finding the one that somehow survived for a few hours wailing in out courtyard, breaking and entering and attempted assault. In the end she was sent to 10 years in prison and had to pay $10,000 in damages mainly for the attempted battery and psychological trauma. Really funny thing is she kept all her money in the house that burned down with the house. So if she lives long enough to get out of prison, she will be dirt poor. Also, to answer the main questions in the replies, why weren't you prosecuted? Well, the only criminal acts were the trespassing and the arson, both of which cannot be proven. As for whether Karen had any connected family, the answer is no. She and her murderer husband had no children, and both him and his odious kin in the police have since died of natural causes. She's like 70 now. Best college guest speaker ever. When finishing up my degree in criminal justice we had to learn about how the justice system works and how sometimes it doesn't. For about 2 weeks we studied a case from the early 90s of a woman that had killed her husband. Because the case is public record and a very interesting read, look up Betty Freeberg 1993. The setting was small-town Iowa and the husband was the town drunk. Everyone in town knew him for a drunk, a brawler, a womanizer and overall just a bad person. His wife was the stay-at-home mom as she wasn't allowed to work or leave the house aside from get groceries. He would go home, beat her and violate her sexuality, and the cycle would go on and the whole town knew. Neighbors were a quarter mile down the road but still would call the police when they heard noises. It was well documented, and because he was never a threat to their daughter the police did nothing aside from take him to jail like a revolving door. Each time he got out he beat her up again. Their daughter was away at college but came home for Thanksgiving. While the father was at work the daughter told the mother that her father had violated her sexuality and that she had even had an abortion because of it. This was the breaking point for the mother. She got her revenge 100-fold. When daughter went back to school after the holidays and husband came home she killed him with his gun at the kitchen table. The table is important because it was a big farm table used for chopping up deer and other livestock. Doing the butchering was her job and she was good at it. If I could find the case reported as pictures of the table and clear marks of chopping. She chopped up her husband and scattered his body over neighboring farms, fed what she could to her livestock and cleaned up. Months went by and winter came and left. Police investigating his disappearance even questioned her while sitting at the table drinking coffee. She explained the marks on the table by explaining that she butchered her own meat and showed the officers her deep freeze. The investigation went on for months until finally a neighbor's dog brought back a body part. They identified it as belonging to him and she was arrested on the spot. She pleaded not guilty and refused any offers. It went to trial and 12 of her peers judged her not guilty due to extenuating circumstances. She confessed to the crime, explained why she did it and how, and that she had no real choice because no one was going to help her. The farm was hers and she refused to give it up as it had been her family's home. She was let go entirely for the murder charge. The next week we had Betty as a speaker to the class to discuss the case and she was awesome. At the time she ironically sold dismemberment insurance for Aflac. Betty, if you ever read this, know you're seen as a figurehead for battered women and you pulled off the best revenge I have ever been able to study. Unjustly fire me? Let me make you go bankrupt real quick. I'm a 34 years old F, who has always been a bit of a tomboy. I like cars, sports and reptiles. When I was 25 I wanted a career change, and finally follow my dream of working in an auto repair shop, as a painter, like my father always did. To start my education I needed to already have a job at an auto repair shop as an intern. So I searched and called a lot of companies to see if they had spots. There were literally several companies that laughed at me because there's no place for a woman on the work floor. Disheartened I tried one final company, who said he'd take a chance with me. I was thrilled. I was promised lots of opportunities to learn and a steady job after graduation. I started a week later, and the first 2 weeks were awesome. I learned a lot, and was promised even more opportunities. He promised I would have 2 to 3 hours a week of private time with the resident painter for practice. Soon after though it went downhill. The owner had bid on a contract with a large city in our country to restore underground containers. I had to sand them down, put sealant on the edges and prepare them for painting. Tedious work, but I did it diligently. The promised practice time never happened. After a while, all I did, day in day out, 8 hours a day was sand down underground containers. By then end of the day my hands and wrists were numb from the vibrations. This BTW is illegal, you're not allowed to sand with a pneumatic sanding machine for more than 4 hours a day in my country, as it causes severe wrist and hand issues. After several months the contract with the city ended, and I hoped my promised practice time would come. But no, it didn't. I was given jobs that had nothing to do with my education. I was told to do jobs that a contractor should do. Like put rebar in front of the windows, repair the sliding doors, repair walls and other small things. Basically nothing to do with my desire to become a painter. After 6 months of doing literally nothing that I could count to my education, my boss called me into his office. He told me he was fed up with my attitude, he made a mistake hiring me. I was fired, on the spot. I was heartbroken and cried the whole way home. I didn't get it. I put 110% into my job, working hard, always on time, staying late if needed and never complained. I didn't understand what happened, and was pretty down for a while. However, several days later I found out I was pregnant, which helped me get over my downness. We had been trying for over a year so we were ecstatic. When the time came that my final paycheck should come in, nothing happened. A week after it normally came in, I called, but was told to not complain and it would be transferred shortly. 2 weeks later, still nothing. Called again and got a very irate boss on the line, cussing at me and calling me things I will not repeat here. I was fed up, and contacted my lawyer. In my country, there's apparently a few laws that my boss broke, without me even knowing about them. First, you're not allowed to fire somebody without reasonable cause, you need to document bad behavior, and give the employee a write-up. After 2 write-ups you're allowed to terminate. My boss never did this. Unlawful termination can end in a fine, and the employee has a right to get as many monthly pays as the employment contract would have continued if the employee wasn't terminated. Which would mean I had a right to another 6 months of pay. Second, you must pay the final paycheck within a week of termination. We were now going on week 4. After the first week, an employee is entitled to compensation of up to €100 per day of not receiving their paycheck. Meaning I was now entitled to at least €2,100 extra pay. My lawyer wrote up a letter to my boss, stating we would be pursuing my legal rights. He didn't respond. A week later we sent another letter, increasing the compensation for late payment as we went. After a month of my lawyer not getting any response, suddenly I received my pay. No compensation, nothing, just basic pay. My lawyer recommended to go to small claims court, and so we did. Mind you, it takes about 3 months before you can appear before court. He didn't even show up in court, but sent a statement through his lawyer, saying how I was a horrible employee. However, he had no proof whatsoever, but I did. I had my performance reports from 1 month into employment and 4 months into employment. And they were stellar. The judge saw right through my boss's bullshit and awarded me 6 months of pay, €12,000, 4 months of late payment compensation. This is because he didn't pay the full amount my lawyer requested, as was my legal right. About €12,000, legal fees, now about €3,000, I was paid the same week. He was then also charged with a fine for violating employment laws. He had to pay $50,000. This resulted in the Employment Bureau This agency makes sure companies comply with employment laws etc., investigating the company. They discovered the building I worked at was unsafe. The foundation was unstable, walls were crumbling and tilting. He was told to make repairs or they would close him down within a month. By accident they discovered he was also cheating on his taxes. So the tax agency got involved. He got charged with embezzlement and tax evasion for both his companies. He had to pay back all taxes he evaded, plus a 100% fine. Coming to a staggering $250K over several years. He didn't have that kind of money, and after struggling for about 2 months, which resulted in him not paying his other employees, he went belly up. Both businesses shut down, and the building I worked at even got demolished. 7 years later it's still an empty plot, and if I ever feel put down by somebody, I take a short drive to that place. And it reminds me, people will sometimes get what they deserve. I'm from the Netherlands, and yes, I'm using dollar in the name IRS. Mostly because I wanted to make this post easier to read for everybody. I'll not use them in the future as it seems to confuse some people. Sorry about that. Yes, my colleagues lost their jobs too, though they did encourage me to seek justice. They too were wronged by him. First off, he let them work in an unsafe environment, which he knew was unsafe. And after I left he asked his employees to work for free as he had financial issues which were later proven to be untrue, at that point anyway. Most didn't accept this and left the company. The ones who stayed did lose their job when he went belly up. I kept in contact with most of them. 2 went into early retirement and are happily enjoying it. Others have moved on and found better jobs within the week. I did feel guilty at first, but the end result, including my colleagues finding better employment, made it worth it. Yes, I did find another painting job for about 3 years, after which I got ill and am now waiting on a kidney transplant / also in a wheelchair. Genetics, not environmental. Kid is doing fine, he's 7 now. The sweet age of them being awesome and slightly annoying all at the same time, haha. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, face the consequences. Figured I'd share it here for anyone who's been cheated on recently and needs some catharsis, as this is pretty fresh. I met Jane after amicably ending a long-term relationship. I didn't think I'd want to date again, but Jane and I really clicked and it was such a nice escape. We hung out as friends before moving on to dating, and within 6 months we had moved in together. I had long since gotten over my ex, and Jane and I were doing great and regularly talking about the future. I was fairly socially awkward and only had a few good friends before meeting her, whereas she had a large circle of acquaintances and friends she introduced me to who became good friends of mine as well. About a year into our relationship, Jane informs me that she had a one-night stand with someone she had met at the bar. Begs for forgiveness, says she's so sorry, that she wasn't used to alcohol, all the usual excuses. Me not wanting to lose this relationship too, and having invested so much time thinking about my future with this girl, believes her. It wasn't easy, and I ended up in therapy for my anxiety, but we worked through it after a lot of talks and crying and long nights, gradually rebuilding trust after she reassured me regularly that I was the one for her and she was still committed to a relationship. I confided in a few close mutual friends, who kept it to themselves. Everything seemed back on track, and I thought we healed. Another year passes when I notice Jane seems off. She's gone more often, more secretive of her phone. I'll wake up to find her on the computer instead of in bed. Red flags flying. One weekend she tells me she's going to her mother's to help her with spring cleaning. I don't really get along with or speak to her mother. Her mother is an incredibly religious woman who was already upset with Jane for living with me before marriage and a few other personal decisions on her end, and feels as if she has control over her life due to financially supporting her, which is why I assume she figured it'd be a safe bet I wouldn't talk to her mom. A few hours after she left, I called her a few times and it went right to voicemail, meaning her phone was off. So I called her mother knowing she wouldn't answer me, and left a voicemail asking if Jane had made it to her house safely. It had been hours and I hadn't heard from her. Few minutes pass and she calls me back, tells me that she called Jane and couldn't get an answer, as I knew she wouldn't. Started asking when she left, etc. I told her she left that morning to help her with spring cleaning. This was news to her mother, who never spoke to her about that. Her worrying about Jane had her talking. I sit there thinking about what I'll tell Jane when she speaks to her mom and has time to think of an excuse. She gets home later that night, and seems totally nonchalant. Turns out her phone is still off, so she hasn't even gotten the calls from me or her mom yet. Perfect. I ask her how her day went. She tells me how much she hates dusting, there was so much on the top of the cabinets, and how they had to carry stuff down to the basement. An elevator would have been nice, all that good stuff. I then decide to let her know I was aware she hadn't been to her mom's. Long story short, she admits to cheating on me again, and had been essentially since I had forgiven her for the first time. While I was dealing with the anxiety and insecurity, while she was reassuring me it would never happen again and I was the only one for her, while we talked about buying a place and all our goals, she was fucking around with the same dude, mostly online, but had met up with him every so often for quickies during the day. I basically shut down entirely, and went to stay with a friend and told Jane it was over. The more I thought about it, the more my sadness turned to anger, and the stupider I felt for giving her a second chance. I had wasted 2 years of my life and made myself vulnerable to someone I fell in love with, who I thought loved me, and made a fool of me. Jane was inconsolable, calling me, my friend who I was staying with, texting and threatening to show up in hopes of fixing it. She was on the verge of a breakdown, claiming she'd do anything, talk to therapists, give me total access to her accounts, anything she could do to make it right. To take back the past. Which is when I seen the opportunity to get back at her. To forgive her, but big changes needed to happen in order for me to do that. She jumped at the opportunity. I told her I needed to be sure she was serious about our future. First, I wanted to look at renting a bigger place, somewhere without bad memories. We were month to month, so gave my landlord notice and asked her to go through the process of securing us a new lease elsewhere as I couldn't handle it right then. I then told her that if we're going to learn to trust again, I want to start taking steps towards an engagement. I don't want to focus on the past. If I do, I'll want to leave. I just want to focus on the future, and the first step should be a joint account. That I still trust her with finances, to which she agreed. I deposited a few hundred into the account, told her I had spent the rest of my savings on paying 2 months advance rent to my buddy I was staying with and he'd give it back to me in installments since I'd be moving out sooner than planned. Now that this was set up, I figured I wanted to ruin her social life. But I knew it would take some more plotting to do that. So I told her to come back to our apartment. And we stayed there waiting out the end of the month. We cried together, she was overwhelmingly affectionate, let me watch her delete her social media pages, made me breakfast most days. She was just so sorry. I wanted to scream at her so badly, but instead I'd ask for comfort and reassurance, and play the wounded animal. We had plenty of make-up sex too, which is the only thing I feel slightly guilty about. She was sure to be extra adventurous for my sake, so when I asked if I could take some photos she was all for it. During this time, I had been distant from our mutual friends, turning down invites and saying things like Jane wouldn't want me to go, or asking a few one-on-one for advice for how do they handle it when their partner gets mad? Does your partner ever break stuff or slap you? No, Jane would never do that. I was just wondering. Then, shortly before we planned to move into the new place, I had cold feet. Told her I didn't think I could do it. That I just didn't trust her. She was frantic, pleading with me not to leave again and begging for something she could do to fix it. So I told her I believed our social circle put her up to it. She swore up and down that no one had any idea. But I asked how could I believe her? She lied to me twice before, I don't trust her around them. That a fresh start means new people in our lives too. That I'd never feel comfortable again as these people I don't know if I can trust were still around. I wore her down until she agreed to ghost them all. But that wasn't enough for me. I told her that I needed the bridge to be burned, because I don't trust them. So I had her rejoin and send a message to the group chat complaining about fake friends, backstabbers and how she was better without them, then block them all. She cried for a long time over that, but if it was what I needed to stay, she'd get over it. I had a bunch of messages from mutual friends asking WTF, to which I told them it was complicated and I'd talk soon. Few more days pass, and it's time to move into the new place. We spend the day moving some things in, and Jane is practically giddy talking about our future plans. I tell her to pick up anything she needs from her mom's, and I'm going to get some stuff from my parents' place and we'll meet back at the apartment that night. As soon as she leaves, I call my friend and we pack up everything I had brought over and take it back to his place. Then I message my friends, telling them Jane had been abusive the last few months, lie, which is why I didn't go out, and that the reason she had blocked them is because she thought I told them and that they were telling me to leave her. I then went to the bank and drained our joint account, which had about $400 from me and about $3,700 and some change from her. Then I sent an email to Jane's mother claiming to be an angry ex who had access to my phone, including all those sexy time photos I took with Jane. Just thought you should know what your whore daughter and that piece of shit get up to. And lastly, I had my friend hit me in the eye twice, swelling it up, then blocked Jane and asked 2 of our mutual friends to meet up with me. And just like that, it was over. I told him how Jane had become mentally and physically abusive for over the past few months after I caught her cheating. I showed them the screenshots of her chats with this guy. I told them I had kept quiet to keep the peace, how she lashed out at all of them when she thought they had been helping me behind her back. How it was so out of character. How she threw a remote at me and swelled my eye when we were moving, and that's when I knew I needed to leave, and why I needed to take the money to get to safety. Jane showed up to my friend's house looking for me, while he told her I had moved and would call the cops if she showed up again while I hid upstairs. Heard how she frantically tried to find me to figure out what was happening and reached out to her mutual friends to make amends and tell them it was all my idea, only to discover the ones I had been talking to and subtly alluding to being abused for weeks, as well as the ones who remembered me coming to them after the first time she cheated, and the ones who had seen my eye, had passed along the information to her entire social circle, and she was met with threats, insults and being ghosted by everyone she knew. How she told the last mutual friend she spoke to before he ghosted her that her mother had said she'd pray for her and cut her off financially for living an unhealthy lifestyle until she can smarten up after seeing the photos, which she can't prove I've ever sent, as her mother certainly wouldn't have kept them, and that she's severely depressed. She's trapped in a 6-month lease with zero money, no friends to rely on, and no one to help her stay afloat aside from maybe her former fling should she run to him. I'll be using her money to cover rent on a new apartment for myself, and bought my friend a nice gift for being my accomplice in this. I plan to stay in therapy, both to get over this and to work through my feelings and how low I stooped to get revenge, as I don't want to carry this negativity with me in the future. After that, I plan to relearn how to be single and enjoy life on my own, with the friends I inherited to keep me company. And before anyone forgets what sub they're in, I know this was shitty of me to do. But I'm okay with that. And no, I don't agree that this brings me to her level. Fucking over someone who trusted you and never did anything to break your trust is not the same as getting revenge on someone who fucked you over. Coming to this sub and complaining about people's morals is like going to the drug subreddit and lecturing people on the dangers. Cheat on me and I'll ruin your life for everybody you touch. Ronnie was a serial cheater throughout high school, but he was more than that. He was manipulative. He would blow through relationships, typically 4 at a time. They would only ever last a week to a couple months before the girls would catch him cheating. He'd proceed to leak their nudes or spill their secrets and move on to a new demographic of women. He was charismatic and scapegoated his problems onto his dying father. It didn't matter anyhow, he would destroy the victim's reputation until they weren't trusted, anyways. Despite this, I was in love. I was his side piece through it all. Morally, I knew it was wrong, but I had never been in love before. Besides, he wasn't lying to me like the other girls. He was honest about the fact he was cheating. I was special. I stuck it out. 2 years later and he's fallen in love with me, too. Or so I thought. He vowed to give up cheating, even gave up porn just to have me love him back. I accepted it. We planned to marry. He was always so smart about his manipulation. When friends blocked me randomly, or called me abusive, I thought it was just a misunderstanding. When people began to become aware of deep, personal secrets, I thought maybe I had slipped up during a conversation. No one ever told me Ronnie had called me abusive, a cheater or a liar. I never knew he accused me of being the things he secretly was. He would insult me late at night, before bed, and then claim he didn't remember in the morning. He would slip sly comments into our talks, just enough to make me doubt myself but never question him. He was a master at gaslighting until I hated myself and only wanted to please him. I was head over heels in love, despite all of it. He would casually slap me, never when I was upset, but when I said things he didn't like. He would slap me across the face and I would be too shocked to speak. He followed it up by laughing and playing it off as okay to do, or a joke, so I wouldn't fight back. If I expressed it was wrong or told anyone, he said I was misunderstanding a playful tap. Halfway through our relationship, I followed work to another state and maintained a LDR with him. It was my dream. I wanted so badly to stay. But after 8 months, I gave up my home, my pets and my job to move 1,000 miles across the country to live with him again. I had literally nothing and was absolutely penniless. 3 months after this, I caught him cheating. He had asked a girl on a date via an alt Twitter account. I was hurt, but ultimately it wasn't so bad, so I forgave him. The seed of doubt was already planted, however. 2 months later, I snooped through his phone and noticed he had several Reddit accounts saved to Chrome. I vaguely recalled he used Reddit to view porn before, and I got a bad feeling in my stomach. I began guessing his common email/password combos. I got 5 hits total. They were more than I expected. I figured maybe he was lying about not watching porn, which is not a big deal to me, but for 6 months he had been using these accounts to cheat on me using hookup and porn subreddits. I confronted him. He screamed, telling me he had already apologized to me for cheating a few months ago and I needed to quit making him sad. That he had already said sorry and I wasn't going to get anything else. He explained that he had continued to cheat because he feared I would leave and he wanted a second option. I spent a week and a half sobbing. I had nothing but this man and I had never been good enough for him. I was destroyed. He screamed at me nearly every day, telling me my crying was annoying, that my depression made him uncomfortable. Telling my friends I was guilt-tripping him over something that didn't happen. Finally I snapped. I had wasted all of my high school and early adult years with a man who did nothing but walk on me. I went back to Reddit and counted every person he had flirted with or exchanged messages with. I began to voice record every conversation. Screenshot every text. Next I downloaded Tinder and Bumble. For every girl he cheated on me with, I fucked a guy behind his back. When we went out with friends, I began to act more and more sad and slowly dropped in conversation how Ronnie had been yelling at me the night before and that it had upset me. I began to vent to his friends and show them every screenshot. Then I emailed his mother, his grandparents and his work voice recordings of him screaming at me. I asked his boss if his company supported domestic violence. I cried to his mother and she held me as I vented my frustrations, explaining how she had been cheated on by Ronnie's father. Ronnie began to scapegoat again. He told me he was sick in the head and his depression was causing him to act like that. I knew he was attempting to gaslight me. When we were young, I was so in love with him that I saved almost every photo and text he had sent me to a OneDrive. I found all the times he had admitted to leaking nudes, cheating and ruining girls' lives. I got in contact with each of the girls, making one big group chat and sending them every bit of evidence I could find. These were then posted all over Facebook. He had dreams of getting into politics. I joined every political group in our area and pretended to be interested in joining. I befriended the members and casually dropped into conversation how Ronnie had cheated on me and verbally abused me and ruined other people's lives. They would inquire more. I would vent and show them the mountain of evidence I had collected. Ronnie was still unaware I had done it. He spent the night screaming and crying about how no one liked him and he wasn't sure why. He had lost his job. His friends and family wouldn't speak to him. He was being publicly shamed on social media and his political group had ousted him. I finally dropped it onto him that I had done it and I was leaving. During all this, I had secretly removed what little money I had from his bank account and contacted distant relatives and asked for a place to stay. I was leaving. He didn't have anything left to abuse or manipulate. I don't have a solid ending for this. I just wanted to say fuck you Ronnie. I wasted my youth being abused and I won't stand for it anymore. I didn't give my twin brother my kidney because he had an affair with my girlfriend and then outed me as bisexual. I was told to post my story here and figured this was my revenge. Cast, fake names for obvious reasons, me, Ryan, brother, Sebastian, mom, dad, sister, Jane, best friend, Isaac, cousin, Kai, backstabbing cow, girlfriend, husband, Daniel. Ryan and my twin brother Sebastian have never ever been close. In fact he made life hell growing up and my parents didn't help by playing favorites, getting him better stuff on our birthday, only going to see films he liked at the cinema and giving him extra money for housework despite us doing the same amount of work. He would always put me down, belittle me, bully me with his friends at school, break my stuff and then blame me and was just a pain in general. Growing up the only people I knew to rely on was my older sister Jane, my cousin Kai and best friend Isaac who all knew what an awful person my brother was. Anyway cut to when I was 17 and I had my first girlfriend, someone I loved very much. We didn't have sex cause she wanted to wait till her 18th birthday to lose her virginity, but it turns out that she was having an affair with my brother behind my back for half the time we were together and only got caught when it was revealed she was pregnant. I was crushed. She knew how much I hated my brother and she saw some of the awful things he did to me but she still went and did that. Cheating is bad enough but to do it with him of all people. I punched him in the face and broke his nose and made him lose a tooth but according to my parents I'm the one in the wrong and now we have to help this girl who is carrying my brother's child and have to help support them. My brother then said he had no intention of being a father and told my girlfriend to get an abortion. She then ran out of town and I never saw her again. Don't know if she had the baby or aborted. All I know is that she was gone and my folks were still praising my brother as the golden child. I was still the black sheep and failure as usual. Another year goes past and me and my brother still despise each other but I had started dating again. Was a long while but I found someone. Found a boy I liked. I am bisexual and this new guy Daniel I had met at college caught my eye. He was deaf and I studied sign language out of boredom, so we got talking and things just seemed to click. We date, fall in love, bring him to my friend Isaac's party to introduce him to friends, and all feels great. At this point the only one who knew I was bi was Isaac, but one day walking into a cinema holding my boyfriend's hand I bump into my evil twin. He points, laughs and says some homophobic remarks. I tell him to go fuck himself and I go see a movie with my arm round my boyfriend. When I got home after dropping my boyfriend home I knew I'd be facing something as I walked through the front door. I saw both my parents on the sofa, my mother crying about how on earth could she have given birth to someone so disgusting. Was it too much to hope she saw the light and was talking about my brother? But nope, she was talking about me and how I'm a stain on our family's name. My father gets up to yell at me, spout homophobic remarks and slurs. At this point I see my brother up the staircase with a shit-eating grin on his face. He then comes down and says he's uncomfortable with sharing a room with a fallout and my folks kicked me out there and then. With what little clothes and money I had I went to Isaac's house and his family took me in, where I stayed for 6 months, actually experiencing familial love and affection, and Isaac's mother and stepdad I consider my own parents now. Eventually me, Daniel and Isaac all get a 2-bedroom flat together and all is good for the time being. Last year, me and my boyfriend, now husband Daniel, are married. Isaac was my best man. My sister and cousin Kai walked me down the aisle. I have a brilliant job in graphic design, have my own house by the sea, and life has never been better. However, I got a call from my sister that my brother was in hospital. I hadn't thought about him that much over the 9-year period since I was kicked out, but being reminded of his existence brought up a lot of painful memories for me. I was told by my sister that Sebastian wanted to see me and that it was urgent, so I went to the hospital he was in and met my sister outside the front entrance. I ask her what this is all about, but she doesn't tell me and that I need to ask my twin. So I arrive to where my brother is, who have my parents at his side, and my folks actually look happy to see me, as if what they did to me hadn't happened, and Sebastian also looked really pleased to see me. It's safe to say something was off. Eventually I ask what's going on and why was I even here, to which my brother tells the family to leave us two alone. He looks so weak, as before he used to intimidate me so much. He told me that he was dying from kidney failure and has been for the past few years, but now he didn't have long left. I knew immediately where this was going. He then said he always regretted that we never got along, at which point I told him no. He looked confused and asked what I was on about, so I simply told him I wasn't going to donate my kidney to save him. He looked as if I had just shit in his food. He then went on about how bad the situation was and that he really was sorry for all the things we did to each other growing up. Like, excuse me? We did to each other? I told him that I just wanted a brother growing up that cared and loved me, who wouldn't try and break me every day for 18 years. He then called in our mom and dad and told them that I wasn't going to give up my kidney. They then started to spout off that I owed them for my existence and that I have a duty to look after family. I asked them where the duty was when they kicked me out of the house, or where the duty was every time my brother gave me a black eye, or their duty was to look after their grandchild when Sebastian decided he didn't want to be a father. I said for all the things he's done, from outing me to having an affair with my girlfriend and abandoning his child, that this was the universe's, and my, way of finally giving back what he dished out to bite him in the arse. I then turned around and walked out of the room, having that be the last time I ever saw Sebastian again. Not sure why they'd want a Faout's kidney anyway. I walked past my sister, who gave me a look. I gave her a look back, who then in turn gave me a look that said I understand. After leaving the hospital I felt as if a great weight had been taken off my shoulders. I went home and never looked back, pleased with my decision. Now last week I get a call from my sister calling to inform me that Sebastian had died. She asked if I was okay and I said I was, that I didn't really feel anything in all honesty. She said she understood to a degree, as Sebastian hadn't been all that kind to her over the years either. I had my husband and Isaac there to support me. Honestly, at this point Isaac may as well be our adopted child, since he's living with us till this whole situation with the world is over. The next day I was getting calls and texts from family members I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me that I'm going to hell for being a bad son, being a bad brother, and for being a fault, and that me and my husband don't deserve children. Hubby and I have been looking into adoption and surrogacy. This makes me second guess my choice of not giving my brother my kidney. Even in death is making things harder for me. I did wonder if I was a bad person and if I made the wrong decision, but I knew that if I was in that position I would have been left for dead. Screw him. Other bits of information that may clear things up. His renal failure was from living a hardcore lifestyle of drugs and alcohol. My folks and sister did get themselves tested to see if they're matches, and none of them were. I disowned them of being my family years ago, apart from Jane, so when I got married I took my husband's last name and hyphen it with Isaac's last name, to which his folks were very pleased about. Some family, Kai's folks and my dad's brother have actually called to see how I'm doing and say they don't judge me for what happened. Others, however, have continued with said abuse, whom I have now blocked. If he had been a good brother throughout my life, I'd have done it without a second thought. I'd have done the same for Jane, Kai, Isaac and my husband. But I felt he didn't deserve it. It's unlikely I'll ever see my parents again, and I'll make sure my children will never meet them. My revenge to them will be being a better parent than they ever were. You broke my heart? Time for you to taste your own medicine. So, been a fan of this Reddit for a long time and thought it was time for me to share the story of one of my few successful revenges, but I may need to do some clarifications beforehand. I am not a native English speaker, so please forgive my grammar and syntax errors. Unlike most of the revenges in this place that are justified, I admit this one was very out of proportion. I am not very proud of it, but I am writing these more as a way of venting than anything else. I am no writer, so this is very long and may be tedious to some. If you wish to read the TL, doctor is down below. So, to the story. This happened about 6 years ago when I was halfway through my medicine degree. In my country, it's not as difficult to enter med school like in the USA, so I was very young, barely 20 years old at the time. Also, I had just recently came out of the closet. Yes, this is a gay story, hee hee. This is very important, because I came out after my first ever male love interest, we will call him Andrew, rejected me and basically outed me to the entire faculty in the process. But that is another story. So, I was in the middle of a very hard TUSA, meaning heartbreak, when here I met the third protagonist of this tale, my rebound, who I will call Philip. Well, I had met him before, around the time I was trying to woo Andrew, because the two of them hated each other, the sworn enemies kind of thing. So, it seemed natural that he came to me after the rejection. Andrew and I had been very good friends and Philip befriended me to get intel or something he could us against him. I was not mad about it, all the other way around, I was totally on board with his plan. The next 2 or 3 months, we spent a lot of time together, partly because we liked to talk SHT about Andrew and bully him to a certain point, mostly bad rumors we spread behind his back, and partly because we had many other things in common, TV series, hobbies, song taste, etc. By the end of the semester, I came to realize I had fallen in love hard for Philip. Sadly, this was not his case. Philip was technically straight, so I did not try anything romantic with him. I later found out he knew of my crush anyways. It seems I suck at hiding my feelings, and just decided to ignore it so as not to damage our relationship. But things suddenly changed. He started acting coldly and treating me bad every time I tried to reach him, and at one point he confronted me about my crush. Not only did he reject me but started calling me a clingy fa6t among other insults. Needless to say, our friendship was completely destroyed. Much later I found out that during this time Philip had been experimenting with his sexuality and was having sex with another hetero-curious dude. When this guy decided he preferred his girlfriend over Philip, he basically turned his anger against me. I admit, I can be quite irritating sometimes, so it seems this was what made me the perfect bullseye for his hate. So here I am, second heartbreak in less than 6 months, that is my luck. But still not mad enough to do something about it. Until I felt the backstabbing. I do not know how, when or why, but some weeks after our fallout, Philip and Andrew had become best friends forever, those you dream having when you were a kid. It was impossible seeing them apart while going around campus, at parties or even in class. Rumor has it they were more than just friends. By this point Philip was also out of the closet, as a bisexual man. And now I was the one being bullied. Soon enough, after they started hanging out, gossip about me became the norm. I became known as a crazy stalker and obsessed little man. Hey, even Gollum from Lord of the Rings seems saner than I based on their stories. Additionally, any contact I had with Philip or Andrew ended in confrontation, to the point I had to actively evade them. Decided to act, and what started only as a little prank, ended being something deadly. Time came for the birthday party of a friend we all three had in common and in which all our social groups will be reunited under one roof. She was a very popular girl. Me and my girl befriend, Clara, designed a little trick that would embarrass my two heartbreakers in front of everyone. It was very simple. We bought some Viagra pills, smashed them, and the plan was to mix some of it in their drinks to make them act horny and get a non-stoppable erection during the whole party. Both loved using skinny pants, So we knew it would not only be very painful, but very visible too. Clarification: as med students, we knew mixing alcohol and Viagra could have side effects, so we calculated a low dosage for our prank. This will be important later. Flash forward, we are all in the party and everything is going great. Too great, I will say. I was very happy, and very drunk. I even thought of just letting my stupid plan go to waste and enjoy the party. But in the end, my bad judgment won. With Clara's help, it was not hard to slip the Viagra powder in my target's drinks while everyone was distracted. They sipped it whole. Minutes later I could see the effects of the drug on Andrew as he was trying to get away from anyone in the dance floor while covering his privates. Fun fact: in Latin America we tend to dance very close to each other, perreo intenso, reggaeton, bachata, all that things, so it was actually very funny seeing him at the beginning trying to explain to every dance partner that he wasn't trying to rape them in the middle of the dance floor with his erection. All things said, he was very well endowed. You may be thinking, what a lame revenge, get out of here. But this is not the end. While Andrew was suffering the funny side effects, Philip was not that lucky. His friends were asking if anyone had some medicine for pain control, as he was having a moderate migraine. Remember the doses thing? Fearing I had screwed up and gave him more than what I wanted, I came to check on him, to see if he was all right. What happened next was what led to the unfortunate events of the rest of the night. When I came close, he pushed me away very hard and threw me to the floor. He was drunk, horny and had a headache, all things making him more aggressive than usual. He started insulting me in front of everyone, shouting that I was trying to take advantage of him while he was sick. If not for some of the people around us that stopped him on time, he would have hit me in the face. In that moment I snapped. I hated this guy, I hated him with all my heart. I hated that I was again the center of all the mean looks because of his dumb comments. I hated him so much, I decided I wanted him dead. Remember, dear reader, I was drunk. Under normal circumstances I would have not been able to pull this through. But the alcohol had weakened my moral compass and the anger had ended the job. I stood up, did not say a thing against him, and went looking for the first aid kit. I had been to my friend's house before, so I knew where it was, unlike Philip's group. I took a pill and handed it to the first one of them I found, telling her it was acetaminophen, for the headache. She bought it and I just waited. In fact, what I had given the girl was a tablet of nitroglycerin I took from the kit. In my country both look very similar, so it's hard to tell them apart. Under normal circumstances, nitroglycerin is used for chest pain, but one of its main contraindications is its use with Viagra due to their potent combined effect. It can be lethal. I knew it. I did not care. Soon enough, I heard the screams. Philip had fallen to the floor due to a drastic blood pressure drop as I expected, and everyone was already calling our version of 911. I will skip fast what happened in the next few hours. The party obviously ended, and Clara took me to her house. She was panicking, believing our prank had killed him and that we would go to jail for the rest of our lives. I was in my drunk supervillain stupor and told her to calm down, assuring her that our police system was so dumb they would not find out. I cannot stress enough how drunk I was, and the egotistical douchebag I can become when that happens. Meanwhile, Philip was taken to the ER where they rehydrated him and were able to stabilize him. So no murder happened that night, although it was close. The next day, I finally recovered my senses while being hangover. Now afraid of my stupidity, I used every means I had to find out what happened to Philip and, more importantly, if someone knew I was involved in all the thing. Something essential here is that Philip was taken to our college hospital due to our friend living close to the campus. As I was doing my practices there, it was easy seeing his medical record, so this is the reason I know what is coming next. Meanwhile, Philip was taken to the ER where they rehydrated him and were able to stabilize him. So no murder happened that night, although it was close. The next day, I finally recovered my senses while being hangover. Now afraid of my stupidity, I used every means I had to find out what happened to Philip and, more importantly, if someone knew I was involved in all the thing. Something essential here is that Philip was taken to our college hospital due to our friend living close to the campus. As I was doing my practices there, it was easy seeing his medical record, so this is the reason I know what is coming next. In brief, Philip had entered a state known as distributive shock due to the hypotension he suffered from the mix of Viagra, nitroglycerin and alcohol. Luckily for everyone involved, He had arrived to the hospital just in time and nor his brain nor his heart suffered permanent damage. His kidney kind of had some acute problems but nothing serious. On the other hand, no one suspected a thing about me. The doctors assumed it had been a bad reaction to the excess of alcohol and maybe a recreational drug at the party, as this was not uncommon to happen. Some tests were done but nothing came out, and after he completely recovered, they just decided to let it be. The police were not brought upon even once. The afterwards of all this is very curious. I assume that due to his near-death experience, Philip became more docile, if you could say. The rumors about me stopped and, with time, our animosity towards each other faded. Same with Andrew. Later that year I found a boyfriend and my heart slowly recovered from what happened with the duo. This experience altogether also helped me realize I had some anger issues among other things, so I started going to psychological therapy to work on them and to prevent something similar of ever happening again. Till this day no one knows what really happened that night, and even my best friend just believes our prank backfired, not that I had actually intended to kill someone. And that is the end. Yeah, kind of heavy. If someone is wondering, I know the huge F up all this was, and as I said before, I am not proud of it. I was very, very lucky nothing serious happened. On a side note, therapy helped me, so that's A+. Rapist has his car and life destroyed. This story is about me, but I'm not the one who carried out any revenge. That honor belongs to a friend of mine. We'll call her Mary. I am from a pretty rough area of a city known for its gangs and violence in the Midwest. You can take a guess where, so as you might expect, I didn't have very much growing up. Several years ago, when I was in high school, I made some not so great decisions, mostly dressing somewhat revealing and making myself popular with boys. I didn't exactly sleep around, but I was attractive enough and had a good amount of guys interested in me, especially the football players, because I was a cheerleader and present at most games. One in particular, we'll call him James, was a little more aggressive than some others about wanting to get into my pants. He was a linebacker, around 6 feet tall, and built like a brick wall, wide shoulders, tall upper body, muscular, compared to me, a decently fit but not exactly strong 5'1" girl. The event, more than once, James had tried to get me to go out with him or stay at his place, but I wasn't interested. He really didn't like that and would frequently demean me, calling me a whore or a slut after being rejected. Eventually though, after a one game, he combined with some of my other friends convinced me to come to a party later that night with the other football guys. I'd never really partied before, so I didn't know what to expect. I got caught up in the moment and played drinking games with James and a few others. That was my mistake. After a few rounds, he convinced me to go to a room with him, and forced himself on me. Even after I told him to stop, he basically guilt-tripped me into staying quiet while he had his way. I don't remember the exact events super well, but I do know that afterwards I left the party crying and was driven home by Mary. The revenge, afterwards, I felt disgusted and ashamed of myself for letting myself get into that position. Luckily I had friends to support me and help me get through it. I wanted nothing more than to forget it and move on, but a few others felt differently. After a few days of him bragging about sleeping with me, I thought he had people convinced that I had caved and decided to give him a chance. What I didn't know or remember was Mary had taken pictures of where I was bruised from him holding me down and recorded me talking about what had happened on the drive back. She had secretly been showing his friends the proof that I had been sexually assaulted and planning to destroy his life. A few weeks after the incident, James got jumped by several of the people I thought were his friends and had to be later rushed to the ER with a broken nose, a few broken ribs, a cracked hip, and several bruises, after a game. At the same time, his car had its windshield smashed in and its tires slashed and spray painted pink. When he got out of the hospital, his parents disowned him and kicked him onto the streets after Mary proved to them he had assaulted me. The aftermath, James dropped out of school after getting kicked out of his house and from what I know slept in basements and spare rooms of friends that would take him in, which weren't many. He couldn't hold down a job and got fired from his last one, which I believe was a retail job, for harassing a female coworker. Last I heard he was still job hunting and living in his grandparents' basement. Sheriff turned vigilante after his wife was killed in a shooting by Southern mobsters. His name was Buford Pusser in his righteous journey to avenge his wife. For most of his life, Pusser made his career in public service. Before he was a police officer, Pusser served as a Marine who later enjoyed a brief stint as a popular wrestler in Chicago. His tall frame and large build earned him the nickname Buford the Bull in the ring. In Chicago, he met his future wife, Pauline, and they got married 2 years later. The couple moved to Pusser's hometown in McNairy County, Tennessee, where Pusser quickly rose through the ranks of local law enforcement. He was elected chief of police and constable, and later he was elected county sheriff at just 27 years old, making him the youngest sheriff ever elected in Tennessee history. The young sheriff was fearless and wasted no time cracking down on mafia activity, concentrating on the state border between Tennessee and Mississippi, which was controlled by two separate gangs, the Dixie Mafia and the State Line Mob. The mob gangs made a lot of money off their illegal production of moonshine, so Pusser's crackdown was obviously not appreciated. By 1967, Pusser had survived countless assassination attempts, killing several of the hitmen who tried to take him out. He was a local hero to the public, but he became a prime target for the increasingly desperate mob. Things changed forever on August 12, 1967, when his wife, Pauline, decided on a whim to accompany him to investigate a roadside disturbance. A car pulled up alongside theirs and suddenly opened fire. Pusser suffered a severe injury to his jaw but survived. His wife, however, was killed. Stricken with the guilt over his wife's death at the hands of a mob hit, Pusser was most likely the only intended target. Pusser cracked down on crime even harder than before. He publicly named his 4 assassins and Kirksey McCord Nix Jr., the leader of the Dixie Mafia, as the mastermind behind the hit that killed his wife. Although Nix never saw justice for Pauline Pusser's murder, though he was later sentenced to life in prison for ordering the murder of a Mississippi Circuit Court judge, the other assassins involved in the murder of Pusser's wife mysteriously dropped dead one by one. Rumors circulated that Pusser had organized hits on the mafia members to avenge his wife. But because there was no evidence to tie him to the deaths personally, and possibly because nobody was going to prosecute Pusser for avenging his murdered wife, Pusser was never charged for the killings. Serial date rapist gets the smackdown he deserves. Justice? When people ask, "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" my mind instantly loads the following story into memory, but I've never shared it. Until now. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest to an entertainment industry family. I spent a lot of my formative years on the road touring. It was a deceptively conservative life. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, I witnessed a jazz sax player from a band that my dad had booked shoot up and drop dead. This really drove home just say no. High school straight shooter. I played music all through school and started working professionally at a young age. I was pretty much straight edge until college. I got around to reading some Hunter S. Thompson and decided that a bong hit wasn't going to kill me. A few years out of school, around 1991, I started a small indie dance label and recording studio. This was back before every kid with a laptop could record in their bedroom. Anyhow, my company HQ became a favorite hangout for local rave promoters and club kids. I became pretty well connected in that scene. I started experimenting with more and more types of party drugs and subsequently found myself with friends who were either major dealers or dealer adjacent. Untouchable. In this clique there were 3 or 4 dudes who would be considered douchebags. You know the type: fake tan, steroids, bleached hair, nice cars, etc. There was one dude in particular whom I always got a bad vibe from. As a young man in my 20s I liked sex as much as the next guy if not more, but even when I was out clubbing looking to get laid, I never pushed my agenda, never used coercion, guilt, etc. to manipulate a woman into bed. If I spend $300 on dinner, I never felt like they owed me something. The only expectation I had was, if you make the date, show up. Which is just good manners. Anyhow, back to the douchebag. Let's call him Tyler. This guy had a great sense of humor, the kind of good looks that make straight boys say damn, money, and a politically connected family. During the time I owned my label I also played in jazz clubs in our city. One of the venues was this really cool martini bar. One of the bartenders was this super cute, bubbly, bright, and just downright fun girl. I met her in the rave scene, but got to know her through my jazz gig. She was super flirty but was super old-fashioned. I'm not saying she was waiting for marriage, but close. She had grown up in a really small town and never really encountered bad people in her daily life, so she was quite trusting. This all changed when she was date raped by Tyler. He played the long con with this lovely human being. She had very little experience with drugs and sex when she went out with him. He got her whacked out on MDMA, did some pretty messed up things to her, had a buddy take photos, and violate her too. She was never the same after that. PTSD, self-loathing, depression. It was as if he killed her. Turn the other cheek, my ass. Tyler told her that she had blacked out and didn't remember being into it. And peppered her with the typical bullshit along the lines of, I don't have to rape anybody, I get all the girls I want. Along with, nobody will believe you, and even if they did, there's no way I'll get arrested. Etc. Personally, I was bullied a lot as a kid, and I can take a lot of shit and not blink an eye. But when somebody hurts somebody I care about, I tend to lean toward asymmetrical responses. Ironically, Tyler was not a consumer of drugs nor excessive alcohol. This factors into things later. I spoke to two people about my plan. One was a major drug trafficker, the other was a member of state law enforcement. The Cliff Notes version of the retribution was, I purchased about $3,500 worth of heroin in pre-packaged / ready for retail baggies. I also got about 10 sheets of really powerful blotter acid. Tyler was attending a birthday party at a restaurant where I knew the valet staff really well. Well, not that well, but I was always an over-the-top kind of tipper. They knew me, knew I knew Tyler, etc. I told them I wanted to pull a prank on him and put something in his car. I slipped the guy a C-note, and told him it was harmless and wouldn't come back on him. So he agreed. I put the contraband under his passenger seat. Gave the keys back and took off. Springing the trap. Tyler was a creature of habit and always took the same route home. My friend the state trooper didn't know what I was up to. I simply told him this dude who hangs around my circle of friends was becoming a major drug dealer and it putting my friends in danger. I told him the where and when and left him to his own devices. Around 1:20 a.m. Tyler gets pulled over and my friend does a DUI check. Tyler went ballistic because he was stone cold sober. The trooper asks if he can search the car. Tyler agrees because he knows his car is clean. He gets arrested for possession intent to distribute, and the legally concealed pistol in his car didn't help either. He fought the law. If he hadn't been such a unfettered asshole, he would have gotten away with no jail time, but he was disrespectful to the judge and got 18 months in prison, not jail, prison. He really was a moron. Instead of keeping his head down, shutting the hell up and doing his time, he acted like a horse's ass and ended up getting killed. I didn't mean for the revenge to go that far, but I don't feel remorse for how things played out one bit. I hope his rapist ass rots in hell. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please let us know in the comments below. Turn on the notifications to know when we post new videos. Thank you for coming to the House of Reddit.